On this vote, the yeas are 407, the nays are 17. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the adoption of the amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 112-265 by the gentleman for North Carolina, Mr. Miller, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment printed in Part B of House Report number 112-265, offered by Mr. Miller of North Carolina.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
By a vote of 4, 7 to 17, the House passes Patrick McHenry's bill, which would allow companies to accept and pool securities up to $1 million without registering with the SEC. It's a practice called crowdfunding. That passes, and this is an amendment vote to the second SEC bill that the House debated today. Brad Miller of North Carolina, a Democrat, offering an amendment to require the disclosure of bonus compensation structures and golden parachute severance packages in advertising materials associated with securities offers made through a general solicitation. The underlying bill they'll vote on in just a couple of minutes would remove the regulatory ban that prevents small privately held companies from using advertising to solicit investors for private offerings. So the Miller amendment, and then we expect a motion to recommit and final passage.
Vote. The yeas are 190, the nays are 234. The motion is not adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to direct the Securities and Exchange Commission to eliminate the prohibition against general solicitation as a requirement for a certain exemption under Regulation D.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk, and if we could have order, we can expedite this.
Members, please take their conversations from the floor. If members would please take their conversations from the well of the floor. The members would please take their conversations from the floor. If members would please clear the well of the floor. Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I am in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. DeFazio of Oregon moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 2940, to the Committee on Financial Services with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment.
I ask unanimous consent that we suspend with the reading of the amendment.
Is there objection?
Point of order.
Point of order is reserved. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I asked to have it the reading suspended because I want to expedite things. I listened to the debate over the previous motion to recommit. I'd just like to address a couple of points in advance. This will not delay the bill. And in fact, if we adopt this motion by voice vote, we can move directly on to passage of the legislation, which I believe enjoys broad bipartisan support. Now, I know we all have tremendous pride of authorship in legislation we write or we move to the floor, and you know, that's to be understood. But sometimes bills are not quite perfect. And I would look at this amendment, which narrows the scope of the bill. That is, it says basically that we're opening up a new way for small business and other undertakings to offer their a share of stock in their business to the public in order to raise capital and grow and employ folks. And that's great. I think everybody here supports that. We are, though, however, I think that we should adopt one minor restriction to that, one that would narrow the scope of the bill, and it's quite simple. It just says that these new rules apply to everyone except for persons who've been convicted of fraud in connection with a financial transaction, including predatory lending to a veteran. Now, it seems to me that there should be unanimous support for that. Nobody wants to open up, this new vehicle for small businesses and others to gain investors, but we certainly don't want to open it up to people who have convicted of fraud in connection with a financial transaction or predatory lending to a veteran. In fact, I just sort of poll the House here and ask, does anybody think that we should allow those who were convicted of fraud or predatory lending to be allowed to engage in this? If so, raise your hand. Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I would hope that we can move along very quickly to this amendment and adopt it by voice vote. I mean, it's narrowing the scope, it's a common sense amendment, and it just addresses the potential for abuse for those who have a proven record of fraud due to conviction. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Purposes, the gentleman from California rise.
I withdraw my point of order.
Gentleman withdraws. Does gentleman seek time in opposition?
I rise to speak in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is not in order.
Gentleman may proceed.
It never ceases to amaze me. Not once, but twice today, you have just taken two bills on the floor that have gone through subcommittee, full committee, unanimously, and came down. This bill accepted every single amendment that came to rules. This bill accepted Maxine Waters' amendment in the committee. Had the gentleman listened to the debate on the floor, you would have heard from your side of the aisle support of this bill. Had the gentleman talked and listened about this bill itself, this has nothing to do about lending. And let me tell you why. When I was 20 years old, I started my first small business. You know what the government does for a small business? If you're someone like me and you come from the wrong sides of the track, they punish you. They tell you you can't go find money from an individual source unless you have a pre-existing relationship. It dates back to 1933. The only thing that this bill does is correct that problem. It opens it up for an individual that has to be accredited. This has nothing to do with lending. I will tell the gentleman from the other side of the aisle, maybe you are not used to a regular order and an open order because your side of the aisle did not play that way in the majority. I will tell you, the committee acted as the American people wanted it to, unanimously working on small business and job creation. America's looking for partnership, not partisanship. I will not yield. You did not take the time to read the bill, understand the bill, and you brought a motion that does not deal with the bill.
The gentleman did not raise his hand when I asked anyone who wanted people convicted of fraud to participate in it.
The gentleman will suspend. All members will suspend.
This bill does one thing.
The chair will remind the members to address their comments to the chair. Gentleman from California may resume.
The bill does one thing, the number one thing the American people are looking for: create more jobs, less partisanship, and more small businesses. I urge my colleagues to reject this motion to recommit and support the bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. The noes have it.
I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. The sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of passage. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Democrat Peter DeFazio of Oregon offering a motion to recommit, which would prohibit those who have been convicted of fraud in connection with a financial transaction, including predatory lending to a veteran, from offering or selling securities under the bill's new rules. The motion to recommit vote here, 15 minutes. The bill itself would remove the regulatory ban that prevents small, privately held companies from using advertisings to solicit investors for private offerings. So 15-minute vote here. Final passage vote is next, and that will about wrap up legislative work for the House for today. The House and Senate conferees did meet this afternoon briefly. Again, they're meeting on 2012 spending, three of the spending bills for 2012 that have passed in the House and Senate. They met for about 10 minutes today to begin working out spending levels for fiscal year 2012, a joint meeting to work on spending for agriculture, commerce, justice and science, and transportation and housing and urban development. Conference is likely to continue in closed session. Lawmakers have broken down the 12 federal spending bills into 2 smaller minibus packages. During this vote, we're going to show you the meeting, short as it was, from earlier this afternoon.
Conference will come to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first conference meeting of the fiscal year 2012 appropriations process. We're happy to see so many of our old friends from the Senate with us today. Look forward to working with Senator Inouye, Senator Cochran, and all the Senate conferees, as well as Mr. Dix and our House conferees. I'm honored to chair this conference in the long tradition of alternating between House and Senate on each appropriations bill. As luck or unluck would have it, it was the House's turn on the underlying bill. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you, and thank you for your dedication to returning to the regular order, which I'm as well dedicated, as well as Mr. Cochran and Mr. Dix. Today's meeting is another step forward in completing our important work on agriculture, transportation, and housing, and commerce, justice, and science appropriations bills. This meeting marks the first conference committee meeting since 2009. When I became chairman of the committee in the House, I made it my goal to return to regular order and doing business the old-fashioned way and bring back the open process that traditionally has been the hallmark of this committee's work. Ranking Member Dix has been instrumental in making this happen on the House side, and I'm delighted that Senator Inouye and Senator Cochran and the members of the Senate committee, I think, see it the same way. I'm proud of the steps we took this year to meet these goals. We've not had a perfect process, as we all know. I would have preferred to bring each of the bills to the floor separately. It's been a huge improvement, though, over the last few years. And just as importantly, we've laid the groundwork for a more complete and efficient regular order process for next year. In addition to the great strides we've made to return to regular order on the House side, we've also pared back government spending to more responsible and sustainable levels. By holding the line on spending with the level agreed to in the Budget Control Act, $1.043 trillion, we've cut overall discretionary spending for the second year in a row, a remarkable achievement that will save taxpayers billions of dollars and help get our budgets back into balance. Within the 3 bills before us, we fund a variety of integral federal agencies and departments, maintaining the critical services and programs the government provides and our citizens rely on. In addition, there are many policy items in both the House and Senate versions of the bills, and I know that my colleagues in each chamber have different funding and policy priorities. It's my intention, as I'm sure it is yours, to represent the values of my constituents, my caucus, my country in the negotiations over these items. We still have a lot of work to do. These are just the first 3 of the 12 bills. We'll need to wrap up between now and the week of November 14th, when this conference report must come to the floor. Conferees on each subcommittee need to come together to find common ground on a host of issues. This will require hard work and tough choices, and I'm sure we will not see eye to eye on each line of each bill. But these challenges are not insurmountable. I know that we can and will work together in good faith towards completion of this package. I expect that in the end we'll have a good product that we can successfully move in both chambers. and report to the President. We have some additional challenges. Next week, the House will be in recess. I've asked and expect our members on this side to be prepared and available over the recess for continued conversations and negotiations. Likewise, Chairman Inouye and myself will be in contact. We'll keep everyone advised on the schedule. We all must work diligently to bring this conference to a close immediately after the House returns. I look forward to working with Chairman Inouye to that end. It's important that we conclude this process as quickly and as respectfully as possible with the comity that has long been a tradition of the Appropriations Committee. I want to thank all of you for taking part in this process and your dedicated staff for your work up to this point and for your continued effort as we work through this process. Senator Inouye, Chairman Inouye, good to be with you. You're recognized.
I'm very pleased that we have finally arrived at our first conference in the FY 2012 fiscal year. As you've pointed out, it's unfortunate that we find ourselves holding this conference so late in the year. But after the many months of discussions and negotiations of the CR, followed by equally heavy negotiations on the debt limit, have severely limited and delayed the committee's work. Clearly, as you've indicated, Mr. Chairman, the time has come to make the best of a bad situation and move forward with our bills as rapidly and efficiently as possible. The Senate has passed 4 bills. It is my hope and understanding that the Senate will continue to consider and pass additional appropriations bills as quickly as possible. I applaud the willingness of Chairman Rogers and the House Committee to work with us on our current minibus. While this approach, as indicated by you, Mr. Chairman, is short of the regular order, I think we can all agree that it is superior to acting on a single omnibus or finding ourselves again forced into a series of continuing resolutions. And like you, I join you in thanking the members of their staffs for all their hard work in writing and managing the 3 bills we consider today, and I look forward to working with you, sir, Mr. Chairman, over the coming weeks as we seek to conclude our work on all 12 appropriations measures. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those words. Mr. Dix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad that we're having this conference. I think it's important that we finish our work. I do just want to say that it has been a pleasure. We got 6 of our bills to the floor. We also did H.R. 1. It took a week on the floor. Gave members a chance to offer amendments and do it like we used to do it. And I'm glad that we're trying to get back to that approach. I think it's in the best interest of everyone. The only other thing I would say is as we finish these bills, I hope that everyone will look carefully at the product, because some of these cuts are going to adversely affect the economy. There's just no question about that. And we still need to grow this economy to get people back to work. And the one thing I worry about is that next month, for example, we're going to have 1 million people exhaust their unemployment compensation benefits. And yet some people are still talking about cutting food stamps and some of the other safety net programs. So I just hope we can think of the people we represent. I know that all the members here are sensitive to that. And again, I want to thank the staff. The staff has done a magnificent job. We have a great staff. They work together. And I'm glad that we've restored bipartisan cooperation on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dix. And what a great colleague he is to work with. Senator Cochran.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you and the other distinguished members from both sides on this conference committee. It's an honor to serve with all of you and a pleasure to have worked closely with many of you over the years. I'm hopeful that we can, in a workmanlike fashion, but careful and thoughtfully, bring these bills together and produce a result that will reflect credit on our institutions of the House and the Senate, and at the same time carry out the responsibilities that our subcommittees have for identifying the funding levels and the way in which our agencies' programs are administered. Thank you all for allowing us to get to this point today. A lot of hard work has already gone before us in the form of hearings and other deliberations, meetings with administration officials, a lot of work. And I think we can be appreciative of the thoughtful leadership that both committees have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cochran. Does anyone else wish to make an opening statement? Hearing none, we want to thank all of you for being here. The chairs and ranking members of the three subcommittees that is the subject of this three-pack bill will now continue their work in resolving the differences that exist between the House and Senate versions. Agriculture Chairman Kingston and Cole, and ranking members Farr and Blunt, the Commerce Justice Science Chairman Frank Wolf, and Senator Mikulski, ranking members Fatah and Hutchison, and THUD chairs Latham and Murray, and ranking members Oliver and Collins. Those subcommittees will now bear the brunt of the hard work in the next few days. We're on a very, very tight schedule. The CR, as we all know, runs out the 18th of November. So we must have the conference report ready for signatures. Is it Friday or Monday? On Monday the 14th. So that we would be able to have the bill on the floor then on the 17th. That's an ambitious schedule, but I'm looking at a lot of ambitious people here. And I have confidence that you can make this take place. We look forward to working together. And Chairman Inouye and distinguished panel, thank you for your hard work. We will be now in recess subject to the call of the chair.
On this vote, the yeas are 190, the nays are 236. The motion is not adopted. Question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from
ask
California.
for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
And this is final passage on Kevin McCarthy's bill, a bill that would remove the regulatory ban that prevents small privately held companies from using advertisements to solicit investors for private offerings. This is a 5-minute vote, and this will wrap up legislative work for the House this afternoon. They are set to be in session tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern, and it's possible the House tomorrow will take up the Coast Guard reauthorization bill. The Senate has gavelled out for the evening and for the week. They won't be back until Monday, and when they return you can follow them on C-SPAN 2. The House, meanwhile, is out. District work period set for next week.
Vote. The yeas are 413. The nays are 11. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that in the engrossment of H.R. 2940 and H.R. 2930, the clerk be authorized to correct section numbers, punctuation, and cross-references, and to make such other technical and conforming changes as may be necessary to accurately reflect the actions of the House.
Without objection, so ordered.
Down and we'll discuss that.
The Chair announces the Speaker's appointment pursuant to 22 U.S.C. 6913 and the order of the House of January 5th, 2011, of the following members of the House to the Congressional Executive Commission on the People's Republic of China.
Ms. Kaptur of Ohio, Mr. Honda of California.
The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 455. Resolution providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2838, to authorize appropriations for the Coast Guard for fiscal years 2012 through 2015 and for other purposes.
Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. The Chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purposes does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to offer my enthusiastic congratulations to Army Specialist Thomas Hauser for being named the Army's 2011 Soldier of the Year. Specialist Hauser is a native of my district, Ohio's 1st Congressional District. He's a 2008 graduate of Colerain High School and son of Colerain Township residents Kim Ranson-Hauser and Michael Hauser. Without question, Specialist Hauser has distinguished himself as the best of the best. This Army-wide competition culminated in a final round of 12 soldiers being tested on a wide array of skill sets to include physical fitness, urban warfare tactics, a day and night land navigation course, battlefield scenario tests, and a variety of drills. Specialist Hauser serves his country as a proud member of the 563rd Military Police Company, 91st Military Police Battalion, 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York. Congratulations to Specialist Thomas Hauser on this great accomplishment. You've made all the folks back home in Cincinnati proud. Yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor one of the legends of college football, Penn State's football coach Joe Paterno, who this past weekend scored his 409th victory as head coach. The win took place on a snowy State College afternoon where the Nittany Lions defeated the University of Illinois. With this past weekend's win, Paterno becomes the winningest coach in Division I football. As if this accomplishment wasn't extraordinary by itself, it's important to note that all 409 wins have come as head coach of one school, Penn State. Starting his football coaching career at Penn State in 1950 as an assistant coach, Paterno's tenure has spanned over 62 years. His 409 wins and 136 loss record is truly unrivaled, passing over legendary coaches Bear Bryant of Alabama, Bobby Bowden of Florida State, and Eddie Robinson of Grambling. From 1950 to today, Coach Paterno has led his team with humility, class, and integrity. He's truly one of a kind, but words can't describe his tremendous contributions to the Penn State community. Today, I stand to honor and recognize Coach Paterno, the winningest coach in Division I football history. Congratulations, Joe Paterno. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes gentleman from Texas rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, as we near Veterans Day, I want to pay special tribute to my friend, First Sergeant David McNerney. Here's a photograph of him here. Here's a photograph of him here to my left. After high school in Houston, David volunteered and enlisted in the United States Navy. He spent 2 tours of duty in Korea. And after leaving the Navy in 1953, he joined the United States Army. In 1962, McNerney was one of the first 500 soldiers sent to Vietnam. During his 3rd tour of duty in Vietnam, he was stationed near the Cambodian border. And in March of '67, he and his company were sent to recover a missing reconnaissance team. Coming under heavy Vietnamese attack, McNerney was wounded by a grenade and his commander was killed. Nonetheless, McNerney continued the fight, calling in close artillery fire. He destroyed an enemy machine gun, he pulled wounded to safety, and he secured a landing zone for medical helicopters, and he refused to be evacuated himself. His action stopped the enemy advance and saved his own men's lives. His valor earned First Sergeant McNerney the Congressional Medal of Honor and was presented to him by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Then McNerney volunteered yet again for a 4th tour of duty in Vietnam. After serving in the Army and the Navy, McNerney returned to Crosby, Texas. And last year, my friend First Sergeant McNerney died in Texas, still a patriot. Mr. Speaker, where does America get such men as these? These warriors, these rare breed, these Americans. And that's just the way it is.
For what purposes gentleman from Florida rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inform my colleagues of yet more beatings and arrests of opposition leaders by the Castro dictatorship in Cuba. Early this week, Guillermo Fariñas, winner of the Sakharov Human Rights Award in 2010, was beaten and arrested by Castro's thugs while visiting another dissident on a hunger strike at a hospital in the Santa Clara province. According to his mother, Fariñas was not allowed into the hospital and was arrested. A state security agent then held him in place and beat him. Fariñas is a dissident journalist who has advocated for a free press and against internet censorship, while also participating in various hunger strikes asking for the release of political prisoners. On Monday, Cuban state security officials also arrested prominent dissident Jorge Luis Perez Garcia Antuñez and his wife Iris at the same hospital and proceeded to drag them through the street. While some across the world continue to ignore the brutal reality of repression and human rights abuses in Cuba, even pushing for appeasement of the Castro tyrants, these heroes continue fighting for freedom and democracy. Let us not forget their brave struggle. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Are there further requests for 1-minute speeches? Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before my freshman colleagues get too concerned, I'm only going to go a couple minutes and talk about what I've been coming to the floor once each week is the whole debate of a high-level nuclear waste and a national repository that is defined in law, a law passed in 1982. That national repository would be at Yucca Mountain. So I've been going through a geography lesson about where we have nuclear waste in this country and comparing it to the site at Yucca Mountain, and then addressing how our colleagues on the Senate side from those states, what their positions are. The House has spoken on Yucca Mountain again this year in a vote in which 297 of my colleagues joined me in ensuring that we had enough money to finish the scientific study to finally bring closure to Yucca Mountain and start, if the science is sound, then start moving high-level nuclear waste from all over this country to a single repository. So today I come to the floor to highlight another location, and this is Yucca Mountain, and I want to remind folks that Yucca Mountain has no nuclear waste on site right now. The waste, once it gets to Yucca Mountain, will be stored 1,000 feet underground. It will be 1,000 feet, the nuclear waste will be 1,000 feet above the groundwater. And Yucca Mountain is 100 miles from the Colorado River, so it's pretty far. It's in a mountain, it's in a desert. It is pretty far from ever being close to major bodies of water. And what's been interesting is as we go around geographically, we find that we have high-level nuclear waste right next to major rivers and major lakes throughout the country. This is one of the most compelling sites in our tour so far. This is a nuclear power plant in California called San Onofre. And if you look at this, yes, this is the ocean. Here is a nuclear power plant. And yes, these are waves that are coming up across to the rocky shoreline and a concrete barrier that is, leads to the nuclear power plant. Now compare San Onofre with Yucca Mountain. There are 2,300 waste rods, that's nuclear waste rod material, on site here right next to the Pacific Ocean. There's none at Yucca Mountain in the desert. The waste is stored above the ground and in pools here. The waste will be stored 1,000 feet underground at Yucca Mountain. The waste here is adjacent to the Pacific Ocean. You can see the waves. Yucca Mountain's in a desert, and it's 100 miles from the Colorado River. San Onofre is 45 miles from San Diego. Yucca Mountain is over 100 miles from Las Vegas, Nevada. So if you want to compare and contrast where we should have nuclear waste, would it be next to the Pacific Ocean, or should it be in a desert underneath a mountain? I would think most Americans, my colleagues, agree on the House floor, based upon our 297 vote total, that it should be in a geological repository underneath a mountain in a desert. So let's look at the surrounding senators and what is their current positions as far as we can determine. Senator Boxer says if the Yucca project is constructed, there will be thousands of shipments of high-level nuclear waste transported through California. She voted no on Yucca Mountain in 2002. Senator Feinstein, after Daiichi Fukushima, has said, I had always thought we didn't need one. Yesterday, and that was the day after the damage done because of the damage in Japan, yesterday candidly changed my mind. Now, she voted no to Yucca in 2002. I think she might be reconsidering. Senator Kyle, well, let's go first with Senator McCain. He voted yes in 2002. I was absolutely opposed to its closure, referring to Yucca Mountain. It's absolutely ridiculous to not have Yucca Mountain after developing it over a 20-year process. I would agree with Senator McCain. We've only spent $12.5 billion for Yucca Mountain. I think it's time that we've finished the project. Senator Kyle is quoted. These are the two senators from Arizona, next to California, is quoted, and he used this example of just everyday residential waste. He says, it is a little like saying since every Wednesday morning everybody in my area, Phoenix, is going to put their garbage out, and because we keep producing garbage, we should not have a dump to where all that garbage is taken. We produce more garbage and store it on site, is in effect storing it on the curb. That doesn't argue for the proposition that there should not be a central repository where that material is taken and disposed of in a proper way. So I come back down to the floor to highlight another location where you have high-level nuclear waste near a major body of water, the Pacific Ocean, not in the desert as defined by law we should. Other states and locations that I've talked about, I first went to Hanford, which is high-level nuclear waste, 23 million gallons in tanks that are leaking a mile from the Columbia River. Then I went to Zion. I will yield.
Zion, just a sheer couple of miles from my district, right along the coast of Lake Michigan, next to 95% of the fresh drinking water, surface fresh water in the United States, and we're storing just literally yards off the shore of Lake Michigan spent fuel rods. That is obviously not the place to be doing that, and my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Yucca Mountain we're talking about 1,000 feet underground, 1,000 feet above the water table, and at least 100 miles away from most of the individuals and inhabitants that are around. A perfect place, and we've spent $14 billion constructing it. It seems like common sense that we want this waste not around fresh water, not around some of the urban areas, but in a place specifically designed as Yucca Mountain is.
And as my colleague knows, reclaiming my time, that Senator Kirk is strongly in support of moving high-level nuclear waste to Yucca Mountain. Senator Durbin has said the right things. We just want him now to lead on that issue for the importance of the state of Illinois. Another week, I talked about the Savannah River site, nuclear waste right on the Savannah River, highlighted the senators there, and now I end up this week talking about California, and this is not the only nuclear power plant that's on the Pacific Ocean. There's one in San Luis Obispo. So I appreciate my colleagues for allowing me this time to do my weekly process of talking about high-level nuclear waste. It is the law of the land, and we're going to continue to work hard until we get this done and we have a central repository for high-level nuclear waste in Las Vegas, in Nevada, at Yucca Mountain. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To continue the leadership hour.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, tonight I'm joined by several of my colleagues from the freshman class to talk about some of the greatest issues facing our country. What we are going to do in this country to get our job creators back on their feet so that we can do something to address the unacceptably high levels of unemployment. For the past 11 months in this Congress, we have been focused on what it would take to get government out of the way and let job creators do what they do best. That's put people back to work. How can we restore the economic growth of this country? Obviously, as part of that, you look at so many of the policies that this country has, whether they're regulations, whether it's overspending, it's our tax policy, but it all starts right here in the House of Representatives of what we are going to do, the policies that we are going to pass to get this country hiring again. Over the past several months, this is the 32nd month in a row, actually, where unemployment has exceeded 8%. For 32 months, the consecutive months, the unemployment rate has been at or above 8%. And remember back in the stimulus, when the stimulus was passed, they said that if it was passed, the unemployment rate would never exceed 8%. But we're in the 32nd month in a row of unemployment over 8%. 14 million people, the number of Americans who are unemployed. The number of net jobs the economy has shed from February 2009, when the stimulus was signed into law, 2.2 million people losing their work. The unemployment rate among job seekers between the age of 16 and 19 is 24.6%. This country faces a crisis. It's a crisis of jobs, and that's what we have risen to the task to accomplish, to find jobs and make sure that we are creating policies to get this country back to work. The House of Representatives for the past 11 months has worked hard to pass legislation, to find ways to get the private sector moving again. And I'd start with a number of bills, what we've called the Forgotten 15. And the Forgotten 15 are a number of bills that this House has passed, many with strong bipartisan support, to get job creators going again, to get the private sector invigorated, hiring once again. You can see a number of these bills: Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act. My bill, H.R. 2021, number 7 on the list. This bill, if signed into law by the President, would create 54,000 jobs. 54,000 jobs around the country, creating opportunities to develop American energy and American energy security. These 15 bills, there's actually more now. This is just the beginning, the Forgotten 15. And the question I hear in town meeting after town meeting is, where are those jobs? Well, I want to show you another chart that shows where those jobs are. You see the Forgotten 15? We did a little search, a Google search. And the Google search showed us that the jobs are right here in the United States Senate. They are waiting to be passed by the United States Senate. Where are the jobs? The Forgotten 15 is piling up in the Senate. The bills that we have passed, bills like the Jobs and Energy Permitting Act, that would create 54,000 jobs waiting in the United States Senate, waiting to be acted on, waiting to be moved, waiting to be signed by the President of the United States. We've got a great conversation tonight, and I hope the participation from colleagues around the country will shed light on our efforts to begin.
Will the gentleman yield just for a second? You've talked about the Forgotten 15. I'm just wondering if the jobs bills that we just passed on the floor just moments ago would add maybe 16 and 17 onto that list.
I would yield, reclaiming my time, yield to the lady from Alabama.
It's actually 22. Our work today on the floor put the Forgotten 15 to a number of 22, and I don't know if you're ready for us to start this discussion, but I would just like to read a couple of words. You know, we've all been carrying around where are the jobs. Everybody has theirs, I'm sure, in their pockets to remind the people of the United States of America of exactly these bills and what we have done to reduce regulatory burden, to allow for offshore drilling. The list goes on, and even today, the access to capital and access for entrepreneurs right here on the floor just minutes ago. But I found myself looking at the thesaurus, looking for a good word for forgotten, because now we're at 22. And instead of picking a great keyword, although there is one, and I'll get to that in a minute, we can look at words like abandoned, blanked out, blotted out, omitted, left behind, drew a blank. But the best one is slipped one's mind. And I think as Americans, we have to ask ourselves, what's on the minds of those in the Democrat majority in the Senate? Because if they were to get out and travel around their district and look into the eyes of the people who are without jobs, who can't put food on the table, who are struggling to make ends meet, I think that it might slip them right back into reality. The President is saying over and over and over again, we can't wait, yet now we've got the tardy 22. These bills need to be voted on by the Senate. It's been over 900 days since they have even passed a budget. This is unconscionable. This is the United States of America, the greatest nation in the world, and yet we have a Senate that is unwilling to do the job that the people of America sent them here to do. So as we continue through this discussion tonight, we need to focus on the tardy 22, the bills that have yet to be voted on by the Senate. I thank my friend from Colorado for having this hour tonight, and with that I yield back.
Well, I thank both